Good evening, viewers, and welcome to the Sunday special episode of Grooming Daughters. Our today's guest is Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee is a second generation in family business. Born in a big joint family in Malaysia and agriculture business, she became a medical doctor and later married to a Singapore doctor, Vincent NG, and has two sons and a daughter. Currently settled with children and grandchildren in Singapore. Due to prolonged illness of her father, being a doctor, she took care and during this time started learning the business. Today, she manages IT ERP developed for in-house and now to global markets as well. In the line with medical training, Dr. Lee has organized medical camps for last 20 more years to the Himalaya countries of Nepal, Sikkim, Himachal Pradesh with the aim to provide assistance to the village heads to improve health services to the villagers. She brings in excellent insights into Malaysian and Singaporean way of family businesses, thinking as well as the aspect of women and family business. Welcome, Dr. Lee. Thank you so much for your valuable time today. We also have Professor Hiten Muchala with us today. He's a passionate teacher and teaches strategy to GFMB students under SP Jain School of Global Management. He's also an entrepreneur in his own business from last 28 years. Welcome, sir, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Sabina, and welcome all the viewers once again this Sunday. Today's episode and today's guest is very, very unique. She's a lady who has, I would say, seen it all. And she is somebody who has joined us from Singapore today. Her brought up was in Malaysia. Now she's happily established in Singapore. She's a second generation entrepreneur into her business. And her name is Dr. Lee. So Dr. Lee, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Singapore. It's a great pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me, of course.
Dr. Lee, for the benefit of our viewers, we would like to know what is your current business? What is your current activity like fintech, agri-tech, and also you are into philanthropy. Can you throw some light on this?
Yeah, now I'm in my 70s. I look at my life in 4 pillars currently. One of them is still within entrepreneur type of mindset at 70 years old. So I do have an interest in fintech and agri-tech as a venture capital. Of course, I'm still on the family holding company board. That is the core business is palm oil plantations and real estate development. In terms of the third philanthropy, okay, I've started philanthropy very early on because I was a medical doctor, and within my own classmate, there was some call for help in the Himalayas countries, started with Nepal. And now, after 20 years, we learned that it's not about going to Nepal to provide a medical service for a short time, but to help them improve their own health sector. And I think we have done some great work there, which another time I will share, helping the villagers to be able to look at their needs for healthcare and learn to provide it. Now, in terms of philanthropy, I started a foundation with the idea that I want my intergeneration to understand that I personally have walked the path, but it's up to them to choose whether they want to follow this path, because it does help us with our business management. Philanthropy is a great learning place. Now, my last pillar, of course, is my family and the grandchildren, right? They are so important to my life, and I've learned to love them, enjoy them, but not spoil them. That's so important. Yes. So if I look at my current activities, it's pretty busy.
It's wonderful to hear that, Dr. Lee, at the age of 70, you are saying that you are very busy. But I think more important than that is on one side, you have a very well-established business in Singapore and Malaysia. But at the same time, you've created this foundation for philanthropy, where you are actually setting high value system for your own children and grandchildren as to what business is all about. And a lot of learning can happen from philanthropy, as you said. What kind of learning can happen?
I totally agree with you, Professor. Yeah.
So what kind of learning can happen from philanthropy?
I think number one, I use the word is when you go out in your own little cocoon, out of your own cocoon, most times in family business, our children are privileged. So they haven't learned to understand how to be empathetic. Because coming from the environment, they are saying, why don't they wear shoes? I think I want them to understand the world, we are all connected, right? And we should be grateful because of, we say, of our karma, with being a Buddhist. But there are other people there that can make us happier. So the love of giving is what I want to show them. But in philanthropy, we have to find a problem statement. And knowing the definition of problem, then you find a solution. That's business. That's very much aligned to business. But the whole essence of learning to understand the community is very important. It's not what you want to do for them, it's what they need, and you're there to help to support. Yes.
Very, very well said. And I think that's a great starting note to this conversation. So Dr. Lee, can you speak something about currently your family and your family constitution?
Okay. In my generation, we have a holding company, so it is more an M&A. But in my immediate family, I do have a constitution. And the constitution says that, of course, values is something we pass on, but more so is how to resolve issues at family level and business level. The most part we want is how do we have sustainability over generations? And without some organization, things are going to be very havoc because each one of us have our individual character. So to me, the constitution is basically a guideline on how things should be managed, but not so tight, and how things can be managed probably for the good of all, and how everyone can benefit for the good of all. But it does take into consideration that not all family has the same attributes. Some may be mentally or physically challenged. Some are entrepreneur and some are non-risk taker. We have to manage all this, and if we are not aware of them, that's when issues pop up and we don't know where to start. Yes.
So I think let me push you back to your very early childhood, Dr. Lee.
Yes.
And I would like to know how were value systems ingrained in your very early childhood? You were born and brought up in Malaysia, right? And your father had a very big palm plantation.
Yes.
How were those value systems? How was that entire joint family work for you? What kind of impact did it leave on your mind?
I think the value system in my mind is three. One is sharing. Since we were young, we means my father generation, uncles and aunties, we all live in a big house. And each family has a room. But my generations and all my cousins, we all play together. There were no toys during our time, right? So
and how big would that family be?
When I lived there were 21 uncles and aunties.
Wow.
And during my time, there were 21 of us. But of course, I spent a lot of time with those nearer my age group. So there were the core of us that were 10. If we climb a tree to get down the guava or the rambutans, we share. So, and when we go and eat in the dining room, the men eat first, the children eat second round table, and then the women of the house eat the third round.
Okay.
So sharing is a very big part of a value system we grow up for. We didn't say that this is mine or this is yours, you know. We share shoes, we share slippers, you know. So to me, that's a change in the generation now. But I'm trying to inculcate this sharing. The second very good value is independence. We live in that time, a very small town. It was relatively quite safe. There were no cars, no big, you know, zooming cars. So we wander the streets, we go into the hills, we follow the river. We learn to take care of ourselves, the bigger with the smaller. You know, even food, you know, we just carry a cucumber and that might be our water bottle, you know. So it was good times, but the independence learned when the adults are busy with their, you know, the men are going out to do their work and the older folks like grandmother at home looking after us, but she can't look after so many. So we really have, I would say, independence and interdependence on, you know, our group. That to me was such a strong value. The third value is very significant in my family. It's called filial piety. We have to really, every time we come back to the big house, we have to go to grandmother first, say hello to the uncles, and then we can go back to our home, our room, not our home. But even my father, I have three brothers, and my father named them in Chinese. Oi, Oi, the first boy was called Oi, second boy is Hao, and third boy is called Sun. In Chinese, it means you must have filial piety. What happened if we had another fourth male? I do not know, but it just happened. He has two sons and it fit in very nicely. Yes. So I think these are a value system that have seen me through my own life. There are others, but this is what make me, I think.
Wonderful. I think of all the three, the one that I love personally the most was the last one, which you said is, you know, whenever as a youngster you will step into your house, the first thing you need to do is go and meet your grandfather, grandmother, and only then you go to your room. And I think that's just lovely, especially when, you know, there's such a big family and a big house.
It's very Indian too, right?
Very Indian too. Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely. And that's in fact the whole idea. We would like to understand the parallels between the Malaysian way of thinking, Indian way of thinking. And to continue on that line, uh, as a child, as a young woman in Malaysia, what is the Malaysian way of thinking at that time towards daughters, daughter-in-laws, and wives?
Okay, during my time at that time, we were the third generation migrants from China. So I come from a dialect group called Hakka. In fact, it means guest. So even in China, we probably could have migrated from the north to the south, which we call home that time in the South China. But we are still called Hakka. So in the Hakka tradition, the man goes out, we didn't own, what I understand is the Hakka tradition, because they are guests, it's very hard for them to own land. So the men have to go out and look for work. And the women are left solely in their village, you know. And if you can see the history, Hakkas live in this round great building, you know, like a family community for both for protection and support. And the women will always be in that community and they have to look after themselves. So they have to look after the chickens, the pigs and eggs, because when the man goes out to work, it maybe could be for a few months or a few years before they come back. And so at that time, that's how my grandfather ended in Malaysia. Now, as daughters, if I look at aunties and uncles, the daughters were, you know, just expected to do work in the house, everything. And the men were like, you know, even a cup of water, they would be served because they worked so hard over to bring in cash. But women work hard too, you know, planting vegetables, you know, but it was so women, my aunties never had an education.
Okay.
But one or two of them have entrepreneur in spirit, and when they got married, they started their own business. But if you are a daughter of that big house, it's very fun, because there are no, everyone loves you, So as a younger female, you are very well integrated in and loved. When you are older, of course, you're expected to do all the housework, and everyone try to matchmake them. All right. So now, when it comes to inheritance, the Hakka women never had any share at all. So if they
Okay.
don't get married, they are looked after by their brothers. Life can be tough, but and they're very little for them to go out and work. Sometimes it's just a salesperson, so they don't have much skills in the business world. Now things have changed. During my time, I have a good education. So in the 1960s, right, education was in English in Malaysia. So a lot of during my time, a lot of girls was compulsory education by the government. So we had a lucky break, very lucky break. And that time, because we had an education, a lot of us become teachers and professional. I became a doctor because the path was open to me. We could afford it. Going to medical school costs a lot of money. So the boys have the best choices. And the girls reach maybe 7 or 10 years of education compulsory, and then they are married or they stay at home. In Hakka family, they are not too worried if we are not married, because you stay back and look after the elderly. So there's no rush to marry everyone off.
Okay. But in fact, that was precisely the next question for you. You are a doctor by education, and coming from a Hakka family, which is very, very traditional in their way of thinking. Did you face any challenges within your family where they said that, why do you want to become a doctor? You are going to get married. You can settle down with some normal studies. Did you have any challenge or any discussions?
I won't call it a challenge. It was always say, why don't you take a simple course, you can go for a social arts. That time was social arts was supposed to be, quite relaxing. Or you just go for a cookery diploma or be a primary school teacher, in the teachers learning college. Not so much challenges, but there were mindsets, that as a lady or female, why am I so different? Thinking from that. So I would say I was lucky. My parents, my mother and father were very open-minded at that time. So yes, that was quite interesting for me at that time. But the challenges was the system. The system had a very low quota for female into university.
Okay.
So challenges were not from the family, but from the system. There were only like 15% of the medical quota was for females.
Okay.
So those were the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you went on to become a doctor, and what brought you to join your family business? What was the turning point in your life, which actually made you think that, okay, you don't want to practice anymore, you will prefer to join your family business?
First, I think I did practice. I got married and stayed in Singapore. So I'm away from the family, the rest of my immediate family. I did practice in a children's hospital as the medical officer. And I had the first 2 child. And I couldn't get into a specialized course, although I was interested in pediatrics. So running in a hospital was quite tough because you had very long, almost 36 hours you have to do night duty. So when I had a 3rd child, I decided to do locum. That means, leave the hospital and do part-time. And it was rather boring. You sit behind your own little room. It's not a grandiose job, a doctor. You hardly meet exciting cases, cough, colds, and your job is just write prescription. And that was when I start thinking, this is not how I want to go about being a medical doctor, you know. So I begin to become, I think it's all my own attribute. I had quite high entrepreneurship attributes. I'm interested in a lot of things and I learn a lot of things. So during that period, there was a good, in Singapore, there was a very good rise in property value. And I was lucky. So I had a small pot of investment money. So I actually did a lot of investment myself, starting up, joining education processes. I started out with partners, not with a family business. Then after that, being a doctor, I had to look after my father who was ill for about 8 years before he passed away. So the thought about joining and understanding family business was when I realized that I am a shareholder of the family business. And so I decided that I have to learn a little bit more about what the family does. It was the challenge comes now. You are a doctor, you know nothing about accountants, you know nothing about running business or a board. What's a board? You know, so there are a lot of things that we are not prepared as a professional. So we think a professional can step into the business environment, not that easy. So to me, I had to go through basic accountancy, basic human resource employee, you know, as an employer. So these are the small little things that I, over 2 years, start to learn before I thought that I could be a responsible board. And then at the end, going through the board of directors course in Malaysia. Right.
Correct. So I think I would understand that there were two turning points. The first turning point was your investment in property market in Singapore, and that's where you actually understood the value of investments and how to generate returns. But along with that, I think the biggest turning point came in your life when your father fell sick for more than 7 to 8 years, and you being a doctor and a daughter, you took care of him. And is it fair to understand that during this period of 7 to 8 years with your father is when you started learning the tricks of your business?
Also learning about how he get into the business. You know, he will reminisce how he got the business. So a lot of history about how he got from his life has panned out. And we were young that time. We were always following him to look after plantations anyway. So I did know the layout. But during that period of 8 years, is understanding more who are the partners, where is the company going, you know, during that period, did they get listed, and what are challenges he had faced? You know, because at that time they had no education too. You know, my father had probably up to 12 years of education. So that was the interesting part.
Right. Uh, so when you eventually joined, you said you became on the board of directors eventually of your father's business. What were the challenges you faced typically as a woman? Were you taken that seriously within your company by the second level management, the third level management, or did you face some issues and how did you overcome them?
When I joined the family, it was in the holding company board. And at that time, only the siblings were on the board. So we have a family board before, and the business had grown to have public listed companies. So they were the independent corporate boards, right? So challenges in sitting around, because when we just come in, my two other brothers had done their MBAs, they came in, maybe have another 5, 6 years of experience of what's happening in the company. It was difficult for me to follow. And intuitively, when I find that something needs to be said, it was very hard for me to say what was on my mind. We were very sensitive to criticism, you know. So I think that was a challenge that the male mind, I think it's the male mind, it's not even my brothers, right? The male mind is very sharp. Why do you say that, you know? And we are not understanding a lot. We're running around the bush trying to say, more emotive feelings in decision making rather in factual decision making. So I think even within your own 5 siblings at the board, there were challenges trying to understand each other. Yeah. The other challenges in second management, I think we were also lucky in the sense that my father built a very loyal management team. I think that time his turnover rate was probably less than 5%. So some of the managers had been with him for the last 30 years, and we grew up with them. So again, this understanding of who are the manager and getting them to know the children, I realize a very important part of sharing the intellectual capital within the company. At least I know if I need some information, I know who to go to. Yeah. So, and how things are being done in the company was very important too at this point. And as you know, because we are related parties, when I took up the IT work, because I invested in an IT company with some local partners. So in the end, when I said I'm looking at my architect company, because when I joined the family group, I was very interested in technology at the time. To me, it's like very natural, that you understand the flow, the SOPs, how things are done. So that was very important. So I went into looking at IT, and I work with teams in Chennai.
Wonderful.
And had a
So,
very
that brings me to another very important question, Dr. Lee, for you, is when you finally decided to join your father's business. Uh, how supportive was your husband? What was his reaction when you discussed with him? Because the business, your father's business, is in Malaysia. You are settled in Singapore, and it would also mean that, yes, to some extent, the family life does get disturbed. How did you and your husband together worked out on this part?
I think I did something that if I had to do again, I did not discuss this with him. If I were to do that again, I would say that we could have discussed a bit more the impact. But it was such an emotional feeling, when somebody you love pass away, and you realize that he has left you something of value. And where is my part in it except being receiving some dividends? So there was a pretty tough time because he was also a ONG specialist. So there was some conflict, I have to admit. Why so much time is being spent on something that I do not know about?
Right.
On the other hand, because he's in his own professional field, he was also very busy. So sometimes when you have both parties are busy, we pass over a certain period of our life. But at the end of that, the domestic part of the family is still me. So I don't think I neglected that. I was still the mother, the daughter-in-law, everything that the children need, I had to cater to it. So we were playing dual roles, and I had the opportunity, being family business, to adjust my timing. That was very important.
Right. So I think you definitely ensured that on one side you are a mother and a daughter-in-law, and that role has to be balanced along with this new responsibility that you took on your shoulder. Uh, that's great. Who would you say has been inspiration in your life? Your father, you said, but how about your mother?
Yes, grandmother started from my grandmother. My grandmother, I know my grandmother for some time from my mother's side. One single lady, 18 children during the war. She was just a gentle lady looking after families, growing sugarcane to make sugar, coconut to make oil, and 18 kids. How does she does it, right? My grandfather had passed away when she was very young too. But she was always smiling and not interfering in anybody's life. So the independence of thought from this lady that, we had a great saying that when the horse died because, it's too tired, you get down and walk. And that's the greatest inspiration I learned from my grandmother. My mother is the same. She was a teacher before marriage, and after marriage, she left her job and became the family. But to me, she knew everything from domestic side. But what was most important was she was the one who encouraged me and my husband to, go out and do our own private practice and make our his clinic on that part. But she really gave me a concept of an icon. Hey, this lady who is always in the house, when my father passed away, she became the board chairman of philanthropy. And again, she outshined everyone by philanthropy, like old folks home, we were supporting every year with cash. Within 2 years, we didn't need to support anymore because donations were pouring in. Because I think the public know that it's well managed, there were no pilfering, and the inmates were happy. And then they were also the school board. How did she raise funds to build more halls for the school was just imaginable. So she would personally say, I am the beggar, but it's for the good of the community. I can write checks, but being a beggar is more satisfying because I could include everyone to donate $5 or $10 towards their own children's future. And she did quite well in building 5 schools. So understanding that women can rise up and be a stature that she never thought about, from a housewife. Could she imagine she is now, she could very well just write a check and be chairman and people think she's a great philanthropist. But she wants to make sure that she is in charge. And not only in charge, she makes other people be responsible. That's what I learned, that delegation and know the roles and know your people very well and volunteer management is the key to business management. So she really is my role model.
Wonderful. And I completely agree with you that, being a housewife and from a housewife, eventually then to take care of her husband's business to start with. And then after that to start with this entire process of philanthropy. And now I understand, Dr. Lee, where your entire foundation's values come from. They come from your mother, right? It's very clear. And I think rightly so that you are inspired by her. You mentioned just sometimes ago that you and your brother, when you joined the business, you found that your brothers, you said that men have very sharp mind for business. Uh, at the same time, what do you think a woman brings into the business? And what are the qualities and strengths of a woman in a business?
I guess for the strength of a woman, we have to manage our emotional, our natural emotional approach with what we call more data approach. I would say we shouldn't neglect our intuition because I remembered my mother always telling my father, you have to beware of that man or manager, And invariably, I think 90 times probably she would be proven right.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that she's, right or wrong, but it's just that intuition for a woman is very strong. Now, I believe for women, we must recognize that we think in terms of red dots. And most times people will say, you women are, thinking about so many things. But I think when the time is right, we know how to connect the dots. So we may not have immediate results, It's like making a cake. It takes a long time to know the right recipe. But you try and try, there will be failures. But for the men, I believe they're very focused because they don't need to look after domestic issues so much, maybe look after the elderly. So I believe they have great strength in what I call putting the right issues in the right box, solve it, and move along. Yeah, but I think we all know now with all the reports that in today's business community, we need both attributes to form a solid board for the community who is your customers.
I think fantastic. You said it really well that both attributes are required, the attributes of a man and a woman in today's business. Uh, if I was to ask you, Dr. Lee, about how is the situation in Malaysia today for a woman entrepreneur, and how is the situation for a woman entrepreneur in Singapore? How would you look at the current context and explain?
All right. I think a lot of difference is based on the government policy. In Malaysia, if you are a Bumiputra, male or female, there are a lot of grants for you to start a business and for you to fail to, because it's grants. So women, I find that the women in Malaysia are more entrepreneur because maybe of the education system. They are not so bogged down with, I would call academics, right? So they start very small from the home as the women. Food, a lot of them are food services. Then they went into human resource as they're looking for the maids or looking for real estate, So women are entrepreneurs based on their own liking. It's very strong in Malaysia. And I think they are being encouraged. Now, however, in Singapore, because of the strong education, a lot of women are professionals. Less risk-taking. I think also because the value of assets is very high. So if you have bought an asset, you would probably have a bank loan for the next 30 years. The risk-taking to be an entrepreneur happens only if you have very strong, support from somewhere. Family or friends, right? Yeah.
Absolutely
So
right.
I think it is still the policy of the government that sets the environment. In Malaysia, a house may be 30,000, same value with the Singapore, but for the same type of house, it could be $1 million. And you are holding this burden for next 30 years. It's very difficult to be an entrepreneur, I believe, in Singapore. So there are only one type of entrepreneur. It's either you're well supported because you're exceptionally intelligent and you have found something that venture capital wants to come into the field, right? But you will not just start, be entrepreneur because you need to feed a family.
Absolutely. And so today, Dr. Lee, you have a daughter, you have two sons, they are married. So which means that you are not only a mother now, but you are also a mother-in-law. How do you play this dual role of mother and mother-in-law? How do you inspire your family? How do you support your family?
All right. Well, the first thing I believe in-laws are important, right? Especially the wives and the husband. So I have included them as part and parcel of my family's constitution that they qualify to sit on the family board. Okay. So of course there are conditions. If you are legally married, you are a beneficiary of the family business. So that is the first point they understand. The second point, as a mother, my kids are married, as you know, but during the time they're growing up, the most important thing to a Chinese family is education. So, well, that's settled. So very important now to me is the bonding. How do they bond together, although they might have different interests? So only one son is in the family business. The daughter is a homemaker, and the other son is a vet, together with my daughter-in-law is a vet, and another son is a professor in SMU, right? So I leave them, I'm quite As a women matriarch, I would say, because the family business started from my side, I'm quite open to the concept that family harmony is more important than the business to be carried on through generations. They can benefit from the business, but they need not fight over the business, and they can have their own path. So a family constitution give a very good understanding to my children and the in-laws, how they can pan out their own future. The ground rules are there. So I do support them in their own personal development.
And coming to the last question, which I would like you to answer. There are many young women who are listening to you today, and so what is your advice to those young women who are actually wanting to take a plunge, entrepreneurial plunge, who want to join their family business? What would be your advice to them?
I would advise to them, recognize that you have a jewel on your plate. You have a family to support you. And you have a family, they have a lot of intellectual capital. They know the bankers, they know their own network. Yeah. So I would say that try to use your family as your sounding board. They might not think that you have a very good entrepreneur way you want to go, but they are very good sounding board. So never forget, the family is there for you. It's up to us to communicate for them, and you must know, of course, the influencer in the family, right? You would say that family business, second gen who are entrepreneur, has bigger chance of, if you take the whole universe of entrepreneurship, we know that maybe 90% survive after 5 years. But to me, entrepreneurship is a learning for them to make their own decision. And in today's world, environment change so fast. So I believe that you need entrepreneurial spirit to also protect your family business. You might change. You can change from one business. You might be, we use the anomaly. I tell them, you need to be like a jellyfish. If one of your legs are cut off, it can grow back again. And if half of your business fall down, like a jellyfish, you cut it in half, some species can be go into 2 jellyfish. I tell them this is the mentality you must have. I think second one is network. Because of global communication, women have to be part and parcel of a women network. There's so much help that women can give to each other. I think in the older generation, I do not know the real reason, but we always think women are fighting against women because maybe the quota is so little. But if you look at today's environment, the women network that empowers and mentor, they are available. Make use of them. So I think for entrepreneur, recognize the problem you are trying to solve. A lot of time they have an idea what they want to build. They forgot that in business, entrepreneurship is part of business. You have to think of who are you trying to solve a problem for and how you solve them. So a lot of entrepreneurs come to me and say, I have this brilliant idea, right? And they think that I can solve this problem. I say, for who? And who's willing to pay you for it? And then that's when they start thinking.
Wonderful. I think those were some phenomenal insights, Dr. Lee. And this is precisely what we do at Asian Institute of Family Managed Business. As you all know, this is the 14th episode that we have today. And it's a non-profit, a not-for-profit organization. The whole idea and purpose is to bring about a change in mindset of having women in family business. How can we groom our daughters by using our family business as a backdrop to develop her personality to grow? And it's very interesting today. Dr. Lee mentioned that they belong to Hakka tradition of China, and where there was a stage where a woman was always expected to stay in the family, look after the family. But today, look at Dr. Lee, what she has achieved and what she has done. And I think this is a great inspiration. And it is very, very possible for a woman to balance both family on one side and at the same time achieving her entrepreneurial journey on the other side. It's possible. Those of you who would like to participate with us, who would like to join us, please contact Ms. Sujata Roy on 98339 67687. More importantly, over and above this event be going live on Facebook every Sunday 5 p.m., we have created a repository of all our previous episodes on a YouTube channel. And the name of that YouTube channel is Woman in Family Business by AIFMB. So those of you who have missed it and who would like to watch the previous episodes, please go to our YouTube channel. Please visit our YouTube channel. In the meanwhile, Dr. Lee, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you on behalf of AIFMB family and community for us to join us all the way from Singapore. It's been pretty late for you in the day today. Thank you so much for being here.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.